now we are going to look at polygon modeling, which I prefer. When you do polygon modeling, you start with polygon primitives. And the polygon primitives are simple shapes like a sphere, for example, and cube, cylinder, and so on. And that might be not very complex, but it is quite amazing how many different shapes you can create by just starting with a sphere, or a cylinder, or a cube. So one very important part of modeling is to see how these simple shapes can be transformed into more complex shapes, and to plan that process. Just to give you an extreme example, if you want to model a human head, one way to do that is to start with a polygon cylinder, where one end of the cylinder is the mouth and the other end of the cylinder is the neck, and then the rest of the cylinder is the head. Or you can start with a sphere and model that into a head, for example. And it's quite obvious that a cylinder can be modeled into a fingers or an arm or so. But let's keep it simple right now. When I create a geometry, one good idea is to use the property box. Click on that small box here, because then I can from the start decide on the size of the sphere in this case, and the divisions. And the divisions are very important because when you increase the number of divisions, the number of polygons will increase, as we'll see. If I just click in the scene here, I will create this sphere that is 3 units in radii, and it has 24 times 24 polygons, so quite many polygons. And if we look at this closely, and if we shade it, you will see that this sphere is much more smooth, while this one is quite rough. And if we render it, you will also see that when we render it, it doesn't look very nice, the right one. But it depends on how close you are going to be to the model, because let's say that this right sphere here is a screw head that we will see at a very far distance, like this, very small, far away, and we render that one. Now you don't see the polygons of it. Or the vice versa, if this one is supposed to be a planet, like the Earth, for example, then we will see it very closely, and the edge will be a little bit nagged or irregular. So if this is supposed to be a planet, or the Earth, for example, then this left sphere here has to have more details. You can change that afterwards in the control, the attribute editor, I mean. If I select the sphere and look at polysphere 2 here, we have subdivision axis here, so I can change this. We also have the radii, and if I select the rough sphere, we can see that that one has only 12 times 12 polygons. So if I need to, I can increase the number of polygons and make it more detailed. But you should avoid to have too much detail also, because later on when you transform the geometry, that might take a very much time if you have too many polygons. And also it increases render time. The channel box can also be used to control some aspects of the geometry, the translate, rotate, and the scale. and you can do that with these tools also. So these very basic changes you can do in several different ways. If I create a cylinder, for example, the process is quite similar. In this case, I drag the bottom of the cylinder and then pull it up. And here I have lots of subdivisions along the axis, maybe a little bit too many. So I open up the attribute editor and change the subdivision height, so I don't have that many subdivisions. How many I need is very dependent on what I'm going to do, of course. One thing that I really recommend is that when you create the different geometries, give them a proper name on this first tab here, because after a while it might be very difficult to actually realize or find different parts of the geometry. So actually having proper names on it is very important. If you go to the hypergraph, you'll see these names also. And I want to remind you that the hypergraph that you have on the window and hypergraph, the hypergraph is very good at getting an overview of all the geometries that you have. Because if we look at another file that I have, this, and let's see, we can have that one. Here you'll see that there is lots of geometries, very many details on this shape, and the hypergraph is very good at organizing all this, so we can actually find it. Okay, what I'm going to show you now is my preferred method of modeling. Of course, you have to combine many different ways, but this is the one that I use mostly. It's the CV editing tool. And let's have a cylinder as an example. We'll have a little bit less number of subdivisions on that one. So this cylinder is composed of all these polygons then. And the idea here by CV editing is that I grab the CVs. The CVs are the points in these connections here between the polygons. I grab them and move them. And in that way I can reshape the geometry. And in order to be able to select and move the control vertices, I have to go over to the select by component type. These two icons up here is very important. We have the select by object type. With that one, I can select the whole object, the whole cylinder. If I switch over to the select by component type instead, then I select parts of the cylinder. In this case, the control vertices. What kind of parts I can select is determined by these icons here. If I turn off the points here and instead turn on the faces, then I select faces or polygons instead, as I have done here. Or I can select only lines. And depending on what you want to do, you have to choose the right one here. And I don't want to select lines or faces now, so I select this one, the control vertices. It can be quite difficult to select stuff in the perspective view. For example, if I want to select just 2 rows it's easy to make an error here. So usually I do it in one of the orthogonal views. It's very important to switch to the correct view in order to make it easier to do the work. For example, I can select the top ones here and then scale the geometry like this. And I select the next row and scale it, move it up. The next one, scale, move, let's see, and move, scale, and so on. And in that way I can reshape this cylinder into something else. And in this case it's very rough, but I hope that you get the general idea that you have lots of subdivisions and then you control these subdivisions on a detailed level. When you have done these general changes here, very often it's a good idea to do a smooth, because in this case you have a very rough outline which doesn't look very good. So by selecting the geometry, and you have to be in the polygons part of Maya here, I switch over to polygons. Here is the smooth tool under mesh, and if I use that one, you'll see that the geometry becomes much more smooth. It adds more detail and it smooths it out. And after that I can continue to make my CV editing and make more changes. So very often the idea is to start with not that many polygons, but get the general shape and then make a smooth in order to get more detail, more polygons. And then I can manipulate these ones a little bit more. And then maybe I do a smooth again, like that. And now I start to have lots of polygons, but and maybe I don't want more polygons now. The attribute editor makes it possible for me to, the channel box make it possible for me to manipulate the smooth afterwards. By looking here in the inputs, I have polysmooth 1 and polysmooth 2. And by manipulating continuity and divisions, I can change the result. Divisions are the number of divisions that I have done. So if I increase that one, I will have more polygons. But as you see, when I do it afterwards, it can be a little bit strange sometimes. If I do it on the smooth 2 instead, it will look a little bit better, I think. Like that. But you should be careful with having too much polygons. The continuity is a measure of how smooth the surface will be. If you select 1, the surface will be very rough, and if you select 1 instead of 0, it will be smoother. And sometimes you need something in between, 0.5 for example, or so. And it will look like this when I have rendered it.